The blood on Elias Ward's collar isn't his. He doesn't realize this until he's already 3 blocks from the courthouse, walking fast without knowing why, the November wind cutting through his thin jacket like a verdict. He stops under a broken streetlight on Meridian Avenue, Euro, the kind that flickers Morse code nobody's ever bothered to decode a euro, and touches the dark stain near his throat with 2 fingers. Not his blood. He tries to remember the last 2 hours and finds only fragments. The hard wooden bench of courtroom 4, the smell of floor wax and old paper, the sound of his own stenotype keys clicking like a heartbeat nobody else could hear. And then a euro, the moment the main microphone went dead. His right hand moves to the inside pocket of his jacket. The USB drive is still there. Small, solid, warmer than it should be. Somewhere behind him, a courthouse door opens and closes. Elias starts walking again. He began stuttering at age 9, 3 weeks after the car accident that left him with a hairline fracture in his left tibia and a rewired relationship with language. The doctors called it cluttering euro, not a psychological block, but a neurological mismatch. His brain generating words at a velocity his mouth simply couldn't sustain. Under stress, syllables pile up like a freeway collision. The first word gets through, the second buckles, the third and fourth arrive simultaneously and jam. W want to say euro, and by then the person he's talking to has already looked away, already filled in the blank with their own version of what he meant. He learned stenotype at 11. Not because his occupational therapist suggested a euro. She suggested deep breathing and slowing down, neither of which worked a euro, but because he found a manual for a Stentra 400 in the school library and spent 2 weeks teaching himself the chord system in secret. The first sentence he ever typed without error was "The court will come to order." He typed it 40 times in a row, faster each time, until his fingers moved before the thought was complete. He understood then. His hands didn't stutter. His hands were fluent in a language most people didn't know existed. By 14, he was transcribing family dinners, school hearings, the pastor's sermons at First Methodist. By 17, he was certified. By 23, after 3 years at Columbia's journalism school, he was covering federal court for the New York Sentinel Euro, the youngest court reporter on staff, the only one who still used a physical stenotype machine instead of voice recognition software, and the only one who never missed a word. His editor, Margaret Osei, had hired him over 4 other candidates, all of whom spoke in smooth, confident paragraphs during their interviews. They talk well, she told him afterward. You listen well. In this building, that's rarer. He'd been at the Sentinel for 3 years when Judge Raymond Calloway killed someone's testimony with a procedural maneuver so clean it left no fingerprints. The Soto case had been building for 18 months. Marcus Soto, 41, a truck driver from the Bronx, had been charged with second-degree manslaughter in the death of Daniel Reyes Euro, a mid-level accountant at Hargrove Capital Management who had been in the process of cooperating with the SEC on a securities fraud investigation that implicated 3 sitting federal judges, 2 state senators, and a private equity firm whose founding partners regularly had dinner with the mayor. Reyes had died on a Tuesday in February, struck by Soto's truck in an intersection in Midtown. The accident reconstruction was inconclusive. The surveillance footage from a nearest camera had experienced a storage malfunction. Soto, who had a prior DUI from 2019, was charged within 72 hours. Elias had covered every hearing. He'd noticed the pattern early, the way motions that should have taken weeks were resolved in days, the way witnesses who appeared on Monday were quietly unavailable by Friday. Because he'd learned early in his career that courtrooms are theaters with 2 performances, the one the microphone records and the one it doesn't. Courtroom 4 on the 14th floor of the Southern District Courthouse on Pearl Street is smaller than it looks in photographs. Euro 70 seats, oak paneling that hasn't been refinished since 1987, and fluorescent lighting that gives everyone the complexion of old paper. Elias arrived at 1:45 for the 2 p.m. hearing, took his usual seat in the back row on the left, and set his stenotype on his knee the way a musician rests an instrument, without thinking, without ceremony, out of long habit. At 2:22 p.m., the court's AV technician slipped out a side door. At 2:26, the assistant to Judge Calloway, a man named Patrick Hess, early 40s, dark suit, the kind of stillness that isn't calm but controlled, leaned down to the AV panel built into the clerk station and made a precise adjustment with 2 fingers. The court microphone's green indicator light went dark. Elias's stenotype kept going. Judge Raymond Calloway, 64 years old, appointed to the federal bench in 2009, leaned back in his chair with the ease of a man in his own living room. "Let me be clear about something," he said. His voice was low and even, the voice of someone who has never needed to raise it to be obeyed. "The evidentiary record in this case is what I say it is. The digital filing has already been flagged for administrative review, which is a process that, in my experience, takes between 18 and 24 months. By which time, he paused, let the sentence finish itself in the room's silence. By which time Soto's direct appeal window will be closed. I want to speak plainly," Calloway continued, his eyes moving to Anand with the precision of a laser finding a target. "You are a talented attorney. The choices you make in the next few weeks will determine the shape of that career in ways you may not fully appreciate yet. I would encourage you to think carefully about where you direct your energy." In the back row, Elias Ward's hands did not stop moving. Afterward, in the corridor outside courtroom 4, Priya Anand passed him without slowing down. Her briefcase swung from one hand, and in the other, she held a folded piece of paper that she let fall from her fingers as she rounded the corner toward the elevators. Elias picked it up. A single line, handwritten, no signature. "If you have what I think you have, IJC, Geneva office. Ask for Torres." He put the paper in his inside pocket, walked to the small press workroom on the second floor, and sat down and connected his stenotype to his laptop and transcribed everything. Every word. It took 11 minutes. His stenotype had logged 4,847 keystrokes between 2 o'clock and 3 p.m. The transcript ran to 9 pages of double-spaced text. He read it through twice, changed nothing because there was nothing to change. Then he built the dead man's switch, a scheduled email set to send automatically in 60 minutes unless he manually canceled it. 8 recipients, the International Justice Coalition's Geneva Bureau, 2 independent investigative outlets based in Washington and Chicago, a First Amendment attorney named Sarah Cho, a legal journalist in Berlin who had covered American judicial corruption for 20 years, Priya Anand's personal email, his editor Margaret Osei, and a secure server he paid $12 a month to maintain under a different name. Subject line, hearing_room furniture, and OV14_audio_deleted full verbatim transcript. Courtroom 4, 2:00 3:00 p.m. He saved the USB. He cleared the screen. Then the footsteps slowed outside his door. 3 knocks. Measured. Unhurried. The door opened before he said anything. Patrick Hess stood in the doorway in his dark suit, hands at his sides, with a particular expression of a man delivering a message he's delivered many times before. "Mr. Ward, the judge would like a word." Raymond Calloway's chambers occupied a corner of the 14th floor with 2 windows overlooking the East River. The room smelled of leather and old ambition. On the wall behind his desk hung his Yale Law diploma, a photograph with the Chief Justice, and a framed print of a learned hand quote. The hand of the law reaches only as far as its record. This afternoon, there was a technical failure in courtroom 4, Calloway said. The AV system experienced an outage between approximately 2:20 and 3 p.m. As a result, there is no official audio record of the status conference during that period. I want to make sure that's understood. Off the record, he paused on those last three words. Were you taking notes during that period, Mr. Ward? The clock on Calloway's desk read 3:52 p.m. 8 minutes had passed since Elias set the timer. 52 minutes remained. He thought about Priya Anand's hands flat on the table. He thought about Marcus Soto, who was currently in Rikers Island waiting for an appeal process that had just been quietly scheduled to fail. He thought about Daniel Reyes, whose name hadn't appeared above the fold in any newspaper since his funeral, whose family still believed his death was a traffic accident. He thought about a 9-year-old boy in a hospital bed who had lost his ability to speak fluidly and found, in the silence of that loss, a different way to tell the truth. And no, Elias said, the stutter, small and precise, landing on the first letter like a period before a sentence begins. My machine was off. I wasn't recording. Good, Calloway said finally. The word landed like a door closing. You're a careful journalist, Ward. The city needs careful journalists. At the door, Elias paused and nodded toward the learned handprint. The hand of the law reaches only as far as its record, he said, and this time there was no stutter at all. Yeah, I know. He left. The elevator took 40 seconds to reach the lobby. The front doors to the corner of Pearl and Fulton took 90 seconds. At the corner, he stopped and checked his phone. 4:01 p.m. 41 minutes to go. He stepped into the doorway of a closed tailor shop where the recess was deep enough to stand in without being visible from the street. His left leg ached a euro. It always ached when he'd been sitting in a hard courtroom chair for hours a euro, and the wind off the river smelled like diesel and cold water. Elias's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He knows about the stentura. Delete everything. He closed it without responding, opened his email app, checked the scheduled send a euro, confirmed, 4:42 p.m. a euro, and put the phone back in his pocket. He didn't run. He stayed in the doorway and watched the street and thought about his mother, who had never once finished his sentences for him, even when he was mid-stutter and other adults were visibly straining with impatience. She'd just wait, as long as it took. The word will come, she used to say. It always does. At 4:38 p.m., Patrick Hess called his cell phone. Elias let it ring. At 4:40, a text. This is a one-time offer. Delete the files and walk away. Career intact. Nobody gets hurt. At 4:41, another. Ward. Last chance. At 4:42 p.m. and 33 seconds, Elias Ward's phone buzzed once with a soft double vibration a euro, the notification of a send email. He exhaled. The sound he made was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. It was the sound of a door opening in a room that had been locked for a long time. 8 people now had 9 pages of verbatim transcript. Within those 9 pages lived the voice of a federal judge arranging, in his own words, the burial of the only testimony that could free a man he'd helped convict. The words were not paraphrased. They were not interpreted. They were exactly what was said, in the order it was said, time-coded to the minute. Because that's what Stenotype does. It doesn't edit. It doesn't decide what's important. It doesn't flinch when powerful men say powerful things in rooms where the official recording has been switched off. It just listens. The story broke 11 days later. Non-national hero Margaret Osei had called the paper's legal team, who delivered a memo recommending they evaluate potential exposure before publishing. It was careful language for a careful stall. The story broke in the Chicago Independent first, accompanied by a statement from the International Justice Coalition in Geneva. By the following morning, the Washington Post had picked it up. By 3 p.m., Judge Raymond Calloway had recused himself from all active cases. By 5 p.m., the Department of Justice announced an inquiry. By 6 p.m., Patrick Hess's attorney issued a statement. Marcus Soto's attorney Priya Anand filed an emergency motion for a new hearing before a different judge. It was granted the next morning. "You sat on this for 11 days, Osei said. "You were evaluating exposure," Elias said. "No estute." When he was tired, sometimes the stutter disappeared entirely, as though his brain had run out of energy for both anxiety and language at the same time. "Write the piece. The whole thing. Your byline." He wrote it that night, alone after everyone else had gone home, the city glittering 30 floors below in the kind of cold, clear night that makes New York look like a proposition rather than a place. He wrote it straight through, 4 hours, and when he was done it ran to 3,200 words and contained one quote from the transcript euro 11 words. The evidentiary record in this case is what I say it is. 2 weeks later, over coffee near Foley Square, Priya asked, "Were you scared?" "And no," he said. "I was thinking about the timer." "He thought you were nothing," she said. "Because of the stutter. People always think that," Elias said. "Not bitterly, just accurately. It's actually very useful." The piece ran on a Sunday in December. He read it on a train going home, standing in a crowded car, surrounded by strangers who didn't know the slight young man in the thin jacket was the person in the story. He was fine with that. He never needed to speak out loud to be heard. At his door, he reached into his inside pocket. The USB drive was still there. Small, solid, warm. The weight of 9 pages. The weight of 11 words. The weight of a microphone that went dark in a courtroom on a Tuesday afternoon in November, while a man in the back row kept his hands moving and wrote down every syllable of the truth. The hand of the law reaches only as far as its record. He unlocked his door and went inside.